Hey there. Tonight, we're going far back. Not just to a distant century, but to a time when science and magic were two sides of the same tarnished coin. We're going to the deepest winter of 1799, where, amidst the chilling silence of a remote Scottish manor, a young woman discovers that her family's legacy is tied not to wealth or land, but to a terrifying, revolutionary secret capable of either saving or destroying the world. Edinburgh, December 1799. The unnatural cold. The final days of the 18th century brought an unprecedented, savage cold to Scotland. Rivers froze solid, the harbors were choked with ice, and the air itself seemed to splinter. This was the backdrop to the tragedy that struck Lady Elara Sinclair. Elara was 22, brilliant and fiercely independent, an anomaly in a society that preferred women to be decorative. Her passion was not needlepoint, but natural philosophy, the study of chemistry, mechanics, and the nascent field of electricity. Her father, Lord Alistair Sinclair, a respected but eccentric scholar, was obsessed with a single esoteric pursuit, the creation of a permanent, stable, cold fire, a substance that could generate extreme cold without consuming fuel, defying the known laws of thermodynamics. He had spent his entire fortune on this work. One frigid morning, Elara found her father collapsed in his private freezing laboratory deep within the family's ancestral home, Blackwood Manor. Lord Sinclair was not ill, he was dead, his body strangely preserved by the intense cold of the room, his eyes wide open, fixed on a complex apparatus of glass and brass. Clutched in his hand was a single cryptic note. The equilibrium must not break. The glass is the key. Seek the alchemist in the shadow of the arch. The apparatus and the absence. Elara found the laboratory door sealed from the inside. She had to use her knowledge of mechanics to dismantle the sophisticated spring lock. The room was the epicenter of an unnatural cold. Every surface was coated in a thick layer of rime, and the air was perfectly still. In the center of the room stood the apparatus, a masterpiece of late 18th century engineering. It consisted of nested glass globes, intricate copper tubing, and a large polished obsidian lens. But the key component was missing. Resting on a velvet stand was a depression shaped exactly like a small, faceted object, a jewel or a piece of treated glass.
This missing object was the glass her father had mentioned. Elara realized two things immediately. Her father had been working on the cold fire until the moment of his death, successfully activating the apparatus. The cold fire substance itself, the key to the entire machine, had been removed immediately after his death. This was not a natural tragedy, it was a theft. The arrival of the agent. Before Elara could properly examine the apparatus, heavy knocking echoed through the manor's frozen halls. The local constable arrived, accompanied by a tall, impeccably dressed man, whose clothes were too fine and too dry for the savage weather. The man introduced himself as Mr. Gideon Thorne, an agent from the Royal Society of London, the elite scientific body of Great Britain. Thorne was polite but relentless. "Lady Sinclair, I regret your loss, but your father was engaged in research of paramount national security. He was attempting to replicate the work of the alchemist, a dangerous technology that could revolutionize warfare." Elara instinctively distrusted him. "My father's work is private. I will not turn it over to the Crown based on your word alone, Mr." Thorne's polite mask slipped, revealing a steely determination. "Lady Sinclair, your father's cold fire is far more than a scientific curiosity. It is a material capable of generating absolute zero, a temperature that halts all motion, all chemical reaction, rendering any object or living thing inert. The note he left, 'Too cold,' is a warning. Someone has the cold fire crystal, and they are preparing to use it." He pointed to the missing space on the stand. Elara was facing a terrifying truth. Her father hadn't merely been studying cold, he had stumbled upon a weapon of terrifying power, and now she was the only one who knew the clues to both the weapon and its antidote. Mr. Gideon Thorne, the polished and demanding agent from the Royal Society, had secured Blackwood Manor, but he had failed to secure Lady Elara Sinclair. Elara, convinced that Thorne's concern was control rather than safety, used her knowledge of the manor's secret passages to slip away under the cover of the brutal Scottish night. The alchemist's clue. Elara's only guides were her father's cryptic note and her knowledge of Edinburgh's secretive intellectual circles. The Alchemist. In 18th century Edinburgh, this term was a romantic anachronism, referring to a member of the secret philosophical guild, a radical group of scientists who pursued dangerous forbidden knowledge outside the scrutiny of the Royal Society and the Church. The Arch. This almost certainly referred to the South Bridge Arch, a massive stone structure near the university, known for its hidden chambers and underground workshops used by clandestine scholars. Elara knew exactly who she was looking for: Professor Malachi Stirling, a disgraced chemist and the last known survivor of the guild, who had been an old colleague and rival of her father. The underground workshop. Fighting the biting wind and navigating the ice-slicked cobblestones of the old town, Elara found the entrance to the Arch's subterranean levels, a narrow, hidden staircase behind a bookseller's shop. She found Stirling in a cavernous, smoke-filled workshop. Unlike the neat precision of her father's lab, Stirling's space was a chaotic jumble of retorts, distillation equipment, and shelves filled with exotic minerals. Stirling himself was a gaunt man with eyes that burned with feverish intelligence. Elara presented the note. Stirling read it, his face turning ashen. "Alistair, dead," Stirling whispered, his voice trembling. "He achieved it," Elara demanded. "We began it together," Stirling admitted, pointing to a scarred wooden desk. "The crystal is the pure essence of cold, a state of zero kinetic energy. It doesn't cool, it absorbs heat and motion instantaneously." Stirling explained that the crystal was highly unstable. If left outside the protective equilibrium field, the apparatus in Blackwood Manor, its power would spread exponentially. A shard of aetherite could freeze a cup of water instantly. A full crystal could theoretically plunge a large city into a perpetual killing winter. The identity of the thief. "Thorne said someone stole it," Elara stated. Stirling hesitated, then pointed to a framed, faded drawing on the wall. SSM. Stirling spat the initials like a curse. "Robert Maxwell. He was our apprentice. Brilliant, ambitious, and utterly ruthless." Stirling revealed that 3 weeks ago, Maxwell had abruptly left Edinburgh, taking with him crucial schematics for the aetherite's purification process. "He stole the schematics, but he needed the crystal itself," Stirling explained. "Maxwell is the thief. Woolwich?"
Maxwell doesn't intend to sell it to the French, Stirling realized with sudden horrific clarity. He intends to use the aetherite on the Royal Navy's newest fleet. If he freezes the English Channel and cripples the entire Navy, he can blackmail both Britain and France, plunging Europe into financial and military chaos. Elara now had a name, a motive, and a destination, but she also had a terrible warning from Stirling. "The aetherite crystal needs continuous cooling to remain stable," Stirling warned. "If Maxwell travels too fast or exposes it to too much vibration, such as on a stagecoach or a ship, the crystal itself could destabilize." Elara knew she had to leave immediately for London. She had to catch Robert Maxwell before he reached Woolwich and turned the cold fire into a global catastrophe. Lady Elara Sinclair left the smoky sanctuary of Professor Stirling's workshop with a clear goal: intercept Robert Maxwell before he could weaponize the aetherite crystal at the Woolwich arsenal. Stirling had provided her with a small, insulated copper flask containing a neutralizing agent, a dense, volatile mercury compound, the only substance that could temporarily dampen the crystal's extreme cold, should she get close enough. The pursuit and the shadow. Elara secured passage on the fastest southbound stagecoach from Edinburgh, bound for Newcastle. The journey was a brutal affair, hampered by the unnaturally persistent snow and ice. She traveled under an assumed name, but she knew she wasn't alone. At every coaching inn, in the reflection of the windows, she caught sight of a familiar, tall figure, Mr. Gideon Thorne. The agent from the Royal Society was a relentless tracker, always maintaining a discreet distance. He clearly wanted the aetherite, but he also seemed determined to keep Elara, the only one who understood the crystal's unstable nature, alive. The first frostbite. As the stagecoach labored through the icy Yorkshire moors, Elara noticed a chilling anomaly. The driver, muffled in thick furs, pointed with a trembling hand toward the inn's well. "Look, milady," he gasped. Elara climbed down to investigate. The well's wooden casing was coated in an impossibly thick, diamond-hard layer of rime ice, far denser and purer than typical frost. The water bucket, usually hauled up gaily for travelers, was frozen solid, not just the surface, but the entire contents, down to the bottom of the deep well.
The anomaly. Ordinary freezing occurs over hours. This was instantaneous. More disturbingly, the ice was glassy and fractured, a sign of water solidifying under immense sudden pressure or zero-point kinetic absorption. This was the first physical evidence. Robert Maxwell and the aetherite crystal had passed this way very recently, and the crystal was becoming unstable. The rapid vibration of the stagecoach, combined with the extreme ambient cold, was causing the aetherite to spontaneously release bursts of its zero-point energy. The alchemist's warning. Back inside the cramped coach, Elara consulted her father's encrypted journal, which she always carried. While outside the equilibrium, the crystal will begin to weep its cold, creating a cascading field of instant frost. Maxwell was not just carrying a weapon, he was carrying a time bomb, and the fuse was the very act of travel. Elara knew she had to move faster. She secured a small private gig, a light carriage pulled by a single horse in Newcastle, using the last of her emergency funds. She was going to push the speed limit, gambling on her own risk versus the crystal's instability. The London Gambit. As she prepared her own departure, Gideon Thorne finally stepped out of the shadows. He cornered her in the stables, his expression devoid of his usual polite calm. "You are pursuing Maxwell, Lady Sinclair," Thorne stated, blocking her exit, "and you know what the frost signifies." "Then you should be helping me," Elara shot back, clutching the reins. Thorne shook his head. "My orders are to secure the technology, not the thief. The Royal Society needs the aetherite to analyze its potential as a power source, not a weapon." He then revealed his true intention. "I know Maxwell's final route. He will abandon the stagecoach near Cambridge and utilize a canal barge to reach Woolwich, a smoother, slower, and colder route." Thorne offered a dangerous proposition. "I will go ahead and neutralize Maxwell, but I need your neutralizing compound and your knowledge of the crystal's equilibrium field to stabilize the aetherite. Work with me, Elara." Elara looked at the ruthless ambition in his eyes. He wasn't entirely wrong. Stopping Maxwell's theft would save countless lives, but his goal was still self-serving.
She faced a choice: continue alone and risk the crystal fracturing before she reached London, or trust the Royal Society agent and gamble on his promise to stabilize the aetherite rather than weaponize it. Lady Elara Sinclair looked at Gideon Thorne, the representative of the powerful, secretive Royal Society. She knew he was ambitious and potentially dangerous, but his logic was sound. The canal route was Maxwell's only remaining option, and Thorne possessed the resources and strategic intelligence necessary for an interception. The treacherous partnership. Elara agreed to the uneasy alliance. She handed Thorne the small copper flask containing the dense, volatile, mercury-based neutralizing compound, but kept her father's journal and the knowledge of the equilibrium field to herself. "This compound buys us hours, not days," Elara stated, her breath misting in the stable air. "You must stabilize the aetherite once we have it." Thorne accepted the flask with a nod. "Our immediate goal is the same: prevent the global frost pulse. We rendezvous at the Cambridge Canal lockkeeper's cottage." They split up. Thorne took the fastest private courier route ahead to secure the lock area, while Elara followed on a swift horse, navigating the treacherous, snow-choked roads that ran parallel to the canal. The unstoppable cold. Elara quickly found Thorne's prediction to be horribly true. The entire canal system, a vital artery for English commerce, was now frozen solid, but this was not ordinary ice. As Elara rode, she noticed the devastating path of the aetherite crystal. Along the banks of the canal, the vegetation, willows and reeds, were instantly crystallized into fragile glass-like structures. The frozen water itself possessed a strange, iridescent blue glow. She came across a section where a narrow working barge, trapped mid-canal, was entirely encased in rime, its canvas sails frozen stiff and brittle. The canal barge's single lamp still burned, but the entire vessel was silent and lifeless, a chilling monument to the crystal's proximity. Elara dismounted and touched the frozen water of the canal. The cold was so intense that her glove instantly adhered to the ice, burning her palm. She needed no further proof. Maxwell was using a small, insulated lead-lined box to transport the crystal, but the crystal was actively leaking zero-point energy at a constant, terrifying rate. She realized the only thing slowing the crystal spread was the massive thermal mass of the canal water itself. The lockkeeper's revelation. Elara had reached the designated rendezvous, a small, solitary lockkeeper's cottage near Cambridge. The lock was key to moving barges from the higher section of the canal system onto the main waterway leading toward London. Thorne was already inside, interrogating the terrified lockkeeper, a frail old man named Mr. Finch. Thorn said, pointing to a small, melted puddle in the center of the wooden floor, the only patch of liquid water in the entire freezing room. He paid the man to bypass the lock and wait for a second barge. Mr. Finch pointed to a small brass thermometer mounted on the wall. The mercury column was broken, shattered at the very bottom. He touched it, the lockkeeper whispered, shivering uncontrollably. He touched the thermometer with his box. Just a tap. Thorn revealed his strategic error. Maxwell didn't take the second barge he paid for. He took the empty coal barge Finch was already using, a large, heavy vessel with deep draft. Elara's mind raced, utilizing her mechanical knowledge. A coal barge is too heavy for one man to pull. Maxwell needs a steady rhythm to move that weight, even on a frozen canal. The icebreakers and the final trap. The canal system used heavy, specialized icebreaker barges, massive iron-hulled vessels designed to maintain a fragile pathway for commerce during mild winters, Elara realized. The constant forward motion and the enormous friction of the icebreaking provide just enough counter-energy to prevent the crystal from fracturing. Thorn understood the implication. Maxwell was now moving quickly, safely, and was almost certainly heading directly to Woolwich. "We must use the only thing faster than a barge," Thorn stated, pointing to a small motorized canal tender, a vessel used by the Canal Authority for quick repairs, currently trapped in the lock's frozen water. "It will be an excruciatingly cold journey," Thorn warned, glancing at the frozen canal, "but it is the only way to catch him before he reaches the main dockyards." Elara looked at the ice-choked lock gates, now frozen solid. The chase was no longer about speed on the road. It was about mastering the mechanics of the ice itself. The lockkeeper's cottage was freezing. The frozen water in the lock gates presented an insurmountable obstacle.
The ice was not mere winter frost. It was aetherite ice, dense, crystalline, and impossibly hard, defying conventional methods of breaking. The problem of crystalline ice. Elara and Thorn stood over the frozen lock mechanism. The metal hinges of the massive oak gates were completely encased in the aetherite ice, which had spread from the water into the surrounding metal and stone. "Dynamite would be too messy. It risks alerting Maxwell," Thorn said, examining the ice with frustration. "And conventional force won't work." Elara focused not on breaking the ice, but on disrupting the bond. She remembered her father's notes on the aetherite's weakness. "The crystal feeds on the absence of kinetic energy, Thorn," Elara explained, tracing a complex diagram in the soot on the cottage wall. "It hates vibration." She looked at the small motorized canal tender trapped in the lock, their only means of pursuit. The tender's engine was a cylinder combustion machine known for its erratic and powerful thump-thump rhythm. The plan, Kinetic Dissonance. Elara devised a plan that relied entirely on her knowledge of mechanics and the aetherite's core principle. Isolate the target. They needed to find the point where the ice was thinnest, the lock gate's massive wooden hinge pivot located beneath the water level. Generate dissonance. They would strap the engine of the canal tender directly to the metal housing of the lock gate. Achieve resonance break. They would then intentionally over-rev the engine, forcing the single piston to beat at a dangerously unstable, erratic rhythm. This would create the kinetic dissonance necessary to shatter the perfect molecular equilibrium of the aetherite ice. Thorn, risking the immediate destruction of the lock mechanism, agreed. "A bold gamble, Lady Sinclair." The break and the pursuit. Working in the debilitating cold, they quickly removed the engine from the canal tender and used thick ropes and chains to secure the rhythmic machine directly to the lock gate's central iron beam. Elara took the throttle. She adjusted the fuel mixture and ignition timing, deliberately pushing the engine past its safe limits. The single piston began to pump with a violent shuddering rhythm, a sound that was pure mechanical chaos, vibrating the entire gate. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. The aetherite ice covering the gate did not melt. It began to scream.
High-pitched crystalline fissures raced across the thick ice, which splintered and fractured, not from heat, but from internal kinetic breakdown. With a sound like 1,000 panes of glass shattering at once, the aetherite ice imploded. The massive oak gates groaned, the pressure released, and the canal tender was free. They quickly reattached the engine and launched the small motorized tender onto the main canal. The coal barge ahead. The pursuit was agonizingly slow, the tender battling against the fragments of crystalline ice left in Maxwell's wake. The entire waterway now seemed to function as a giant,
frozen, glass-encased tunnel. Thorn took the tiller, his face grim. The ice is thinning here, Elara. Ahead, shrouded in the persistent, freezing mist, they saw it, the dark, heavy silhouette of the coal barge, moving with a slow, powerful rhythm that hinted at the steady power of the hidden icebreaker cushioning it. He's almost to the London Junction, Elara warned. As they closed the distance, Thorn reached into his coat and produced a specialized long-range spyglass. He focused on Maxwell's coal barge. Thorn reported urgently. Maxwell is on the stern. He's opening the insulated box. Maxwell was not waiting for Woolwich. He was going to use the massive heat sink of the River Thames itself to trigger the crystal's final devastating release. If he exposed the crystal in the cold heart of London, the resulting global frost pulse would instantly freeze the River Thames, crippling the world's largest port and seizing the city by cold siege. Vance had no choice now but to risk everything on a dangerous up-close confrontation. অবশ্যই এখানে গল্পের ষষ্ঠ এবং অত্যন্ত গুরুত্বপূর্ণ অংশটি শুরু করছি, যেখানে এলারা এবং থর্ন জ্বলন্ত কোল বার্জে ঝাঁপ দিচ্ছেন এবং রবার্ট ম্যাক্সওয়েলের সাথে চূড়ান্ত সংঘাতে লিপ্ত হচ্ছেন। Bash, The Alchemist's Glass, Part 6, Zero-Point Conflict. The coal barge, propelled by the relentless rhythm of the icebreaker, was mere miles from the densely populated, vital waterways of the River Thames. Robert Maxwell was on the stern, preparing to unleash the aetherite crystal's catastrophic power. The desperate leap. Elara and Thorn pushed the small canal tender to its absolute limit, the engine protesting with violent vibration. They managed to pull alongside Maxwell's heavy barge, the two vessels grinding against each other amidst the crystalline ice fragments. He's going to throw it into the water, Elara.
"Thorn!" yelled over the roar of the engines. Thorn, drawing a specialized grappling hook, acted first. He hurled the hook, securing a line onto the barge's heavy wooden railing. "Jump and target the crystal!" Elara, clutching the copper flask containing the neutralizing compound, made the perilous leap. She landed hard on the rough, coal dust-covered deck, instantly aware of the crystal's intense, penetrating cold that cut even through her heavy winter coat. The confrontation. Maxwell spun around, his eyes blazing with the messianic fervor of a disillusioned genius. He held the aetherite crystal in its small, lead-lined box. The crystal itself was visible through a glass aperture. It was a shimmering, faceted piece of pure, crystalline ice, pulsing with an unnatural, soft blue light. "Lady Sinclair!" Maxwell roared, his voice carried by the relentless engine rhythm. "This is not theft, it is redemption!" Thorn engaged Maxwell first, trying to disarm him with a quick strike. But Maxwell was prepared. He swung the lead-lined box like a weapon, the zero-point cold emanating from it striking Thorn's arm. Thorn screamed, a chilling, momentary sound. Where the box connected with his heavy coat, instantaneous rime ice spread outwards, freezing the cloth solid and locking Thorn's elbow joint instantly. The agent was crippled by the abrupt thermal arrest. The antidote and the crystal. Elara knew she couldn't rely on force. She had to disrupt the crystal's equilibrium. She focused on the vibrational field around the box. The movement of the barge, combined with Maxwell's manic swinging, was pushing the crystal to its fracture point. She had to risk accelerating the process to defeat him. Elara unstoppered the copper flask and hurled the neutralizing compound, the volatile mercury-based liquid, directly at Maxwell. The cold air instantly vaporized the mercury, creating a highly toxic, freezing cloud. Maxwell shielded his face, momentarily distracted by the chemical cloud. Elara seized the split-second opportunity. She grabbed a nearby heavy coal shovel, not to hit Maxwell, but to strike the steel deck immediately beside the crystal's box. She delivered a sharp, rhythmic clank, 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 a focused, high-amplitude vibration designed to maximize kinetic energy transmission. The focused shockwaves traveled through the deck, into the box, and directly into the aetherite crystal. The effect was spectacular and terrifying.
The crystal did not shatter instantly. Instead, it responded to the forced kinetic energy with a desperate, massive surge of its power. A shockwave of pure cold blasted outwards, coating the entire deck in a sheet of shimmering, brittle ice. The zero-point lock. Maxwell was thrown backward, the crystal box sliding across the deck. He scrambled for it, knowing his life's work and the impending global catastrophe rested on its capture.
Elara beat him to the box. She didn't try to open it. She instead slammed the entire lead-lined container into the barge's massive iron engine housing, the very source of the barge's stabilizing kinetic energy. The impact was the final, perfect act of kinetic dissonance. The crystal, now fully unstable, responded to the massive contained vibration of the engine housing by generating an uncontrolled, localized thermal arrest. The aetherite crystal fused itself to the iron engine housing. The crystal's zero-point energy instantly bonded with the surrounding metal, creating a localized, absolute zero seal. The crystal was now neutralized, not destroyed, but permanently locked into the enormous, immovable thermal mass of the engine. The barge's rhythmic forward motion instantly ceased as the engine froze solid, silenced forever. The aftermath. The coal barge drifted to a sudden, silent stop just short of the Thames Junction. Maxwell, defeated, stared at the frozen engine housing, his global ambition reduced to a block of inert, useless metal. Thorn, thawing his frozen arm, rose slowly. He secured Maxwell, his respect for Elara now undeniable. "You didn't destroy it, Elara," Thorn observed, his voice hushed. "You stabilized the crystal by making the engine its new equilibrium." Elara, physically shaking from the cold and the adrenaline, looked at the silent, frozen engine. She had saved the world from the global frost pulse, not through magic, but through the precise application of her father's forbidden science. The crystal was neutralized, the thief was captured, and the secret of cold fire was now contained, encased in the heart of a frozen engine, waiting for the future to decide if it was a weapon or the key to a new era of energy. Blackwood Manor, 5 years later, 1804. 5 years had passed since Lady Elara Sinclair contained the cold fire crystal. The world had moved on, busy with the Napoleonic Wars and the accelerating pace of the Industrial Revolution.
Elara, now financially secure thanks to Thorn's secret grant, funneled through a seemingly innocuous colonial investment firm, had turned Blackwood Manor into a highly advanced, secluded research facility. Her focus was thermal mechanics, utilizing her father's theories of kinetic energy transfer to design highly efficient, safe steam engines, the perfect counter-technology to the crystal's destructive cold. The uninvited guest. One cold autumn evening, a heavy, sealed courier delivered a letter bearing the royal crest, but sealed with the discreet, recognizable mark of the Royal Society's Special Projects Division, Gideon Thorne's department. The letter was urgent and contained a new, terrifying dilemma. Thorne requested an immediate, secret meeting, not at the manor, but at the site of the crystal's capture, the old Woolwich dry docks. When Elara arrived, Thorne was waiting near the massive, frozen coal barge engine, still encased in lead and awaiting deep-sea burial. He looked older, his ambition tempered by a professional weariness. "Elara, I need your expertise," Thorne began, dispensing with pleasantries. Thorne opened a specially constructed, heavily insulated lead box. Inside, resting on a bed of dry ice, a technology far ahead of its time, was not a crystal, but a single, perfectly spherical glass orb. It was about the size of an apple and perfectly clear. "This is the alchemist's glass," Thorne explained. "It was the final container your father created before he began the aetherite purification." The problem of perfect vacuum. Elara examined the orb. She immediately noted the unusual density of the glass and the complex valve system that was sealed into the orb's casing. "This is a containment vessel," Elara stated. "But for what?" "Precisely," Thorne confirmed, his voice low. "It contains nothing." Thorne explained that the vacuum, like the crystal's absolute cold, was a state of absolute equilibrium. The orb was perfectly silent, perfectly stable, and contained no air, gas, or moisture. "The orb is a scientific marvel," Elara murmured. "Because of its secondary effect," Thorne revealed. "If the perfect vacuum is broken, if the orb is damaged, it will cause a violent, instantaneous rush of atmosphere to fill the void." The orb was a scientific black hole, a controlled miniature catastrophe.
The new thief, the anti-royalists. Thorn confessed that the Royal Society was using the alchemist's glass in secret trials, hoping to understand the principle of absolute energy isolation. However, the orb had been stolen 3 days prior. "The thief is not Maxwell," Thorn stated. Thorn revealed that the Brotherhood intended to use the implosion field of the orb to assassinate a key member of the royal family during the upcoming King's procession in London. "They won't just kill the King's brother, Elara. They will cause an act of terror so absolute and inexplicable that it will plunge London into chaos, enabling the coup," Thorn pressed. "You alone understand the mathematics of absolute states." Elara was once again drawn into a terrifying game of high-stakes science, only this time, the weapon was not cold and silence, but an invisible, catastrophic vacuum. Lady Elara Sinclair was now officially an agent of the Crown's most secret scientific wing. Her mission was to track down the anti-royalist Brotherhood's thief and neutralize the alchemist's glass, the perfect vacuum orb, before the King's procession in 3 days. London under surveillance. London in 1804 was a city on edge, paranoid about Napoleon's invasion and rife with political unrest. Thorn had established a covert headquarters in a cramped, damp office near the Old Bailey, getting Elara access to the latest highly sensitive surveillance reports. The thief was identified as Silas Rook, a former mathematics lecturer at Cambridge who was dismissed for his radical political views. Rook was known to hide in the labyrinthine network of London's printing houses and radical coffee shops, the hubs of the Republican Brotherhood. The key to tracking Rook was not traditional espionage, but scientific anomaly. "The glass won't be carried on his person," Elara explained to Thorn. "It's too dangerous and too fragile. The slightest structural impact could trigger the implosion field." Elara hypothesized that Rook would be moving between safe houses, utilizing the most secure and stable environment available, London's vast network of subterranean wine cellars and storage tunnels, which maintain near-constant temperature and air pressure. The dissonance of silence. Elara began her search in the most likely areas, the cellars beneath radical coffee shops in the Clerkenwell district. She didn't look for guards or secret doors. She looked for silence.
The alchemist's glass, containing a perfect vacuum, was an area of absolute acoustic silence. While it wouldn't make a sound, it would actively dampen all external vibration within its immediate vicinity due to the unique properties of the glass and the void inside. Elara utilized a simple but highly sensitive mechanical sound level indicator, a crude seismograph, that measured minute air pressure and vibration shifts. In the first 5 cellars, the indicator showed the expected chaotic vibration from street traffic and footfalls, but in the 6th cellar, beneath a notorious meeting place called the Republican's Mug, the indicator showed a terrifying, localized reading, a small area of perfect vibrational nullification. The alchemist's glass was here. The trap and the clue. Elara descended into the cellar. The room was empty except for rows of wine barrels. The nullification reading pointed to an inconspicuous, sealed wooden crate in the center of the room. As she approached the crate, she felt a profound, unnerving stillness. The air itself seemed to absorb all ambient sound. Before she could open the crate, the cellar door slammed shut behind her. Rook, the thin, intense mathematician, emerged from the shadows, holding a simple, single-shot pistol. "Lady Sinclair, the illustrious daughter of Alistair Sinclair," Rook hissed. "You understand the danger, don't you?" Rook revealed that the crate was a trap. The alchemist's glass was housed inside a finely sprung, pressure-sensitive mechanism within the crate. If the crate was opened, or if the pressure on the box shifted by as little as the weight of a book, the mechanism would trigger and shatter the glass. "The detonation would not happen here, Lady Sinclair," Rook said, his eyes glittering with fanaticism. "It would happen during the King's procession tomorrow." Rook handed Elara a final, horrifying clue, a precise map of the procession route with a specific spot circled, the narrow medieval bridge near Westminster. "I have planted 10 copies of this crate along the procession route, timed to be moved by my agents just before the King passes," Rook explained. "The trigger is linked to a barometer inside the crate. I need you to find the correct one and neutralize it by tomorrow morning."
Rook vanished through a secondary hidden exit, leaving Elara trapped with the impossible task of finding the one genuine bomb among 10 decoys, all while facing the deadline of the King's procession. অবশ্যই এখানে গল্পের নবম অংশটি শুরু করছি, যেখানে এলারা সাইলাস রুকের সূত্রগুলি বিশ্লেষণ করছেন, আসল বোমাটি শনাক্ত করার চেষ্টা করছেন এবং সেই নিখুঁত শূন্যতাকে অকার্যকর করার কৌশল তৈরি করছেন। The Alchemist's Glass, Part 9, The Barometric Riddle. Lady Elara Sinclair was trapped in the Clerkenwell cellar, the silence of the alchemist's glass bomb a palpable threat. Rook had planted 10 identical crates along the route, with the genuine bomb distinguishable only by the barometer trigger inside. The riddle of the barometer. Elara's immediate challenge was twofold: escaping the sealed cellar and deciphering the scientific logic behind Rook's plan. Thorn quickly located and freed her, but time was critically short. Rook had not simply chosen a random location. He had chosen the narrow bridge near Westminster, a crucial choke point in the procession route. Elara realized the key lay in atmospheric science. The Westminster Bridge effect. The narrow arches of the old bridge created a significant pressure difference compared to the open squares of London. As the massive crowd and the King's carriage moved onto the bridge, the air pressure would fluctuate wildly, causing the barometer inside the crate to spike. The trap. Rook was using the natural chaos of the procession to trigger the implosion field. But the trigger was complex. The bomb would detonate only when the barometer reached a specific critical low-pressure threshold, the point where the atmosphere around the glass was momentarily stretched thin, making the vacuum's pull irresistible. Rook isn't using a timer, Thorn, Elara explained, tracing the pressure gradients on the map. He's using ambient pressure. The 10 crates are decoys, each with a slightly different barometer setting. The search for the critical reading. Elara and Thorn obtained meteorological data and detailed architectural surveys of the route. Elara's knowledge of hydrostatics and pneumatics allowed her to calculate the precise low-pressure coefficient that the true implosion field would require to trigger. 75 inches of mercury, Elara concluded. Rook set the bomb to detonate exactly when the pressure falls to that point.
Thorn and his agents began the perilous, frantic search, locating the 10 identical crates along the procession route. They had to rely on Elara's quick calculations to check the crate's barometric settings without opening them. The process was agonizingly slow, involving specialized equipment to remotely read the internal barometers, all decoys. The 9th crate was found hidden inside an empty water barrel near the bridge, 75 inches. "That's it, Thorn," Elara confirmed, her heart pounding. Disarming the perfect vacuum. The crate was secured, but the task of disarming the alchemist's glass remained. The orb was exquisitely fragile, housed in a complex pressure rig. Any attempt to simply smash it or move it roughly would cause the immediate catastrophic implosion. "If we break the glass, the implosion will flatten the entire street," Thorn warned. Elara thought back to the initial design, the small, sealed valve system on the glass orb, designed by her father. The vacuum is too perfect, Elara realized. We cannot destroy it, we must corrupt it. Elara devised a plan using her father's early chemical designs. Carefully drill a tiny, microscopic hole into the outer casing of the lead-lined crate without touching the inner glass. Introduce the agent. Use a highly reactive, inert, and extremely dense gas, likely a carefully prepared xenon compound, and slowly inject it through the microhole. Corrupt the vacuum. This dense gas would slowly permeate the microscopic flaws in the glass orb's sealed valve system. The gas would contaminate the perfect void, introducing kinetic energy into the vacuum. It will slowly equalize the pressure inside the orb, Elara explained. The vacuum will no longer be perfect, it will be inert. When the crate is finally opened, there will be no implosion, just a slow equalization of pressure. Working through the night in a heavily stabilized pressurized chamber, Elara and Thorn executed the agonizingly slow procedure. Hours before the King's procession was due to begin, the small indicator light on the micro-injection pump turned green. The vacuum was corrupted. Elara and Thorn had neutralized the alchemist's glass. The King's procession proceeded flawlessly, and the anti-royalist coup failed to materialize, denied the catastrophic chaos they needed.
অবশ্যই এখানে গল্পের দশম এবং চূড়ান্ত অংশটি শুরু করছি, যেখানে এলারা এবং থর্ন শেষ পর্যন্ত সাইলাস রুককে ধরে ফেলছেন এবং এলারা তার বাবার বৈপ্লবিক বৈজ্ঞানিক জ্ঞান ব্যবহারের বিষয়ে চূড়ান্ত সিদ্ধান্ত নিচ্ছেন। Crown, The Alchemist's Glass, Part 10, The Perfect Equilibrium. With the alchemist's glass neutralized hours before the procession, the threat of the implosion field was averted. However, the architect of the chaos, Silas Rook, remained at large. The capture of the mathematician. The key to Rook's capture lay not in the streets of London, but in his scientific pride.
Rook, the meticulous mathematician, would not simply abandon his dangerous work. He would be waiting somewhere to confirm the success or failure of the barometer trigger. Elara remembered the central theme of Rook's plan: pressure. Rook won't be watching the procession, Elara stated. Thorn immediately ordered a check of all known scientific observatories and meteorological stations. They found Rook hiding inside the small, isolated and heavily reinforced chamber of the Royal Meteorological Observatory, located on a secluded hill overlooking London. Rook was found sitting before a giant liquid mercury barometer, frantically recording the pressure readings during the time the procession crossed the bridge. He looked up, defeated, when Thorn and Elara entered. "It failed," Rook whispered, staring at the mercury column. 76. My calculations were perfect. "Your math was flawless, Rook," Elara said, stepping forward. "But your assumption was flawed." Elara explained that when Thorn's agents discreetly checked the 10 decoy crates, their quick movement and the minimal air displacement caused a minute but critical fluctuation in the localized pressure field near the crates. 75 critical point, thus failing to trigger the detonation sequence. "You tried to weaponize the air, Rook," Thorn concluded as his agents moved in. Thorn's final offer. With the two most dangerous scientific criminals captured and the technology secured, Gideon Thorn's position within the Royal Society was solidified. He called Elara to a final private meeting at the Society's headquarters. Thorn showed her the alchemist's glass, now safely vented and inert. "We have two revolutionary artifacts from your father, Elara," stated Thorn. "The etherite that masters cold and the glass that masters vacuum."
Together, they represent the key to endless energy and absolute mastery over the elements. I have the support of the crown. He renewed his offer, now framed not as a request, but as a plea for partnership. Join me. The alchemist's true path. Elara looked at the inert glass orb, remembering the cold ambition in Maxwell's eyes and the fanaticism in Rook's. She understood that her father's great work was not the cold fire crystal or the perfect vacuum, but the equilibrium apparatus itself, the mechanism designed only to neutralize the danger. My father's genius was not in creation, Thorn, Elara declared. It was in restraint. Elara refused the offer definitively. She used the remaining goodwill and influence she had gained from saving the crown to make a final, lasting impact. The Blackwood Foundation. She formally established the Sinclair Foundation for Applied Mechanics, dedicating her life to publishing safe, practical scientific discoveries like refrigeration and efficient steam power for the benefit of industry and medicine, ensuring her father's theories served humanity, not warfare. The sealing. She oversaw the permanent sealing of the alchemist's glass, the perfect vacuum orb, alongside the aetherite crystal in the deep-sea vault, ensuring that both scientific paradoxes would remain untouchable for generations. Lady Elara Sinclair returned to Scotland, the new century beginning under the shadow of war, but with the promise of unprecedented scientific progress. She became a silent patron of science, a woman who proved that true power lies not in controlling the invisible, but in understanding its limitations. Don't let history remain a secret. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to join the expedition.